I gotta admit, the end of the Fever Mercury game made me sit up for a second because it got a little spicy with Caitlin Clark having an interaction with DeWanna Bonner out on the middle of the floor, sort of waving her back to the bench.
The ending of the Indiana Fever versus Phoenix Mercury matchup was something that immediately caught my attention. Not because of the score, not because of some late game heroics, but because of the tension that spilled out onto the court between Caitlin Clark and DeWanna Bonner. It wasn't just a minor brush-up either. It was one of those moments where you knew instantly that it would be replayed across social media feeds.
Now, we all know that the Indiana Fever is trying to make a push for the playoffs. We've been getting mixed signals coming out about Caitlin coming back, about Caitlin being, somewhat ready to go. Then we got Stephanie White saying it's day-to-day again, basically. Well, I'm here to tell you, Caitlin Clark is not shying away from making headlines.
Chopped up into clips and dissected by fans and analysts for days. In the middle of the floor, Clark gave Bonner a dismissive hand wave, essentially telling her to go back to her bench, and that visual carried weight. To the casual viewer, it was just a fiery exchange. But to anyone following the league
at this point in time. But that interaction stood out to me for a couple of reasons. I mean, number one, obviously, is the history there, where DeWanna Bonner was on the Fever for a cup of coffee and then winds up on the Mercury. That after, before the season, Caitlin Clark said she wanted to win a ring for her, right? She said, I want to win for her. And Caitlin Clark went out of her way to also, shine light on how DeWanna Bonner had risen up to the top of, near the top of the all-time WNBA scoring ranks. And then,
This felt like the latest chapter in what's becoming a long series of veterans trying to assert dominance over Caitlin Clark and failing in the process. And here's the thing, Bonner might have just made the worst decision of her season. Picking a fight with Clark isn't like picking a fight with any other young player. Clark is the lightning rod.
To the right, behind the coach coming out, John and DeWanna Bonner. DeWanna Bonner said,
The camera magnet, the face of the league, whether you like it or not. The internet erupted the second that moment hit timelines. Fans instantly chose sides. But as usual, most of the conversation circled back to how Clark once again stood her ground. And came out looking unbothered. The Fever have been battling ups and downs all season. Injuries piling up, uncertainty around rotations, constant speculation about whether Clark is truly healthy or playing through pain. And through it all, she remains the headline every single night. Stephanie White can say day-to-day as often as she wants, but Caitlin Clark isn't day-to-day. She's every day. Every storyline, every narrative somehow comes back to her. And when Bonner tried to puff her chest and grab some of that spotlight, she found out the hard way how unforgiving that spotlight can be. What makes this interaction sting even more is the history. Remember, Bonner spent a short stint with Indiana. Clark went out of her way last season to praise her, saying she wanted to win for Bonner, acknowledging her climb up the all-time scoring charts, showing genuine respect. That's why the visual of Bonner turning around and trying to sun Clark felt so jarring. It wasn't just heat-of-the-moment trash talk. It looked like a veteran deciding she was going to check the rising star, and instead handing her an easy W in the battle of perception. And perception matters more than ever in today's WNBA. Think about the context. The Fever are in the middle of a turbulent season, with fans growing increasingly frustrated by injuries, vague updates, and officiating that seems allergic to giving Clark a fair whistle. Every game feels like a test, not just of the team's talent, but of their ability to weather the noise. Into that storm, Bonner stepped up and essentially gave Clark the easiest viral clip of her career. Clark didn't need to drop 30 points. She didn't need to hit a logo 3. All she had to do was stand there, wave Bonner away with that mix of annoyance and confidence. And the cameras did the rest. That single gesture turned into the talking point of the night, overshadowing everything else that happened in the game. And that's the Caitlin Clark effect. She doesn't even have to dominate statistically to dominate the conversation. For Phoenix, this is particularly embarrassing. The Mercury actually played well as a team. 5 players hit double figures, they spread the scoring around, and they got the win. But by the end of the night, none of that mattered. The Mercury's performance was buried under the avalanche of memes, takes, and fan edits focusing on Bonner versus Clark. That's brutal. Imagine winning the game, but losing the headline battle so completely that fans barely even mention the final score. That's what happens when you challenge Clark. And it's not like we haven't seen this before. We've seen Angel Reese try to get physical, Kennedy Carter take cheap shots, Lexie Hull dragged into scuffles last season. Time and again, veterans think they can teach Clark a lesson, and time and again, they end up feeding her brand. This isn't rookie hazing anymore. This is desperation. Plain and simple. The older stars can feel the shift happening. Diana Taurasi is closer to the end than the beginning. Bonner herself isn't exactly the future of the Mercury, and they know the Fever have something brewing with Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and a young core that could dominate for the next decade if developed properly. That's intimidating. That's threatening. So instead of focusing on basketball, they lash out, hoping to rattle Clark, hoping to knock her off her game. But here's the problem. Clark isn't rattled. She's amused. She knows the playbook at this point. She knows every hard foul, every shove, every word of trash talk is really a backhanded acknowledgement of her status. And she flips it. What really seals this whole saga is how much it reveals about where the Fever and the Mercury stand right now. On one hand, Phoenix can feel proud of stacking up double-digit scorers and getting a much-needed win. On the other hand, the only lasting memory from this matchup is Caitlin Clark making DeWanna Bonner look pressed. That's the irony of this league's current reality. Clark doesn't need the scoreboard to validate her impact. She controls the narrative in ways that even longtime stars can't replicate anymore. And that's why every veteran who thinks they can check her ends up adding another brick to the wall she's building. The game within the game here is about perception. Bonner wanted to show toughness, to let Clark know she wouldn't be pushed around. But the second she overplayed her hand, she became the story for all the wrong reasons. Fans online didn't just side with Clark. They mocked Bonner, turning her attempt at intimidation into a meme. The captions were merciless. "Congrats, you gave Clark another viral clip." That's the harsh truth. Every time a vet steps up thinking they're putting Clark in her place, they're really just giving her another platform. And Clark knows it. She thrives on it. She doesn't need to scream or shove back. She doesn't need to prove anything physically. She can dismantle you with a smirk, a sarcastic wave, or a perfectly timed stare down. That's a skill that transcends stats, and it's why her influence stretches beyond basketball. She's not just a scorer or a passer. She's a cultural force. And Bonner, whether she meant to or not, just reinforced that. Now, while all eyes were on that clash, let's not forget the other players who actually showed out in this game. Lexie Hull deserves a mountain of credit. While Bonner was jawing at Clark, Hull was logging 35 minutes, dropping 18 points, and playing gritty defense. She's the kind of player who might not lead SportsCenter highlights, but is absolutely invaluable in crunch moments. Every time the Fever needed stability, Hull was there, steadying the ship. That's clutch in its purest form. But instead of celebrating that, the focus went to the drama. That's frustrating for Fever fans who are desperate to see the rest of the roster get the respect they deserve. And that ties back to coaching. Stephanie White has to do better. The Fever can't keep folding defensively and letting teams carve them up with balanced scoring. When 5 players on Phoenix hit double figures, that's not just a hot hand. That's a systemic breakdown. Fans are growing tired of the same tired postgame lines about day-to-day injuries and taking it one game at a time. At some point, accountability matters. And while White is trying to juggle injuries, rotations, and media chaos, she's also losing control of the narrative when moments like Bonner versus Clark steal the spotlight. For Clark, though, that's part of the game. She understands that every exchange like this, every time a vet tries to big dog her, she gains more ground. She doesn't just walk away unbothered. She walks away bigger. The fan base rallies. The media amplifies. And the league finds itself more dependent on her than ever. That's why the crowd reaction matters too. Fever fans have had enough. They've watched their star get battered, ignored by refs, targeted by opponents, and now disrespected by veterans. Their response? They amplify Clark even more. They take the disrespect and flip it into energy, into support, into viral moments that spread beyond the WNBA's usual reach. That's why Bonner lost twice here. She lost in the perception game with Clark, and she lost with fans who were never going to let her off the hook. What's wild is that Bonner actually had a good game statistically, scoring 19 points and contributing to the Mercury win. But none of that matters now. Her stat line is buried under the avalanche of memes and commentary about Clark waving her off. That's legacy damage. Because in sports, sometimes it's not about what you did on the scoreboard, it's about what fans remember. And fans will remember Bonner looking rattled by Caitlin Clark far longer than they'll remember 19 points in a mid-season game. For Clark, this is fuel. Every slight, every cheap shot, every glare is something she files away and turns into energy. We've seen her respond with logo threes, with dazzling passes, with quiet but deadly efficiency. She doesn't let it break her, she lets it build her. And that's what makes her dangerous. The league can't contain her with officiating. Opponents can't contain her with physicality. Veterans can't contain her with mind games. She keeps flipping all of it into her own narrative. And that's why the Caitlin Clark effect is undeniable. She doesn't just change games, she changes conversations. She shifts the spotlight. She forces everyone, even her opponents, to participate in her rise. And the more they resist, the bigger she gets. Bonner learned that the hard way.